Before we begin tonight's journey into the gentle corners of forgotten history, take a moment to settle in. Let your body relax and your mind begin to drift. Now, if you'd like, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? And what time is it where you are? Whether it's 11 p.m. in Norway, 3 a.m. in Sri Lanka, or just a quiet afternoon nap in Argentina, I'm glad you're here. Let's fall asleep to the story of the porcelain pillow. You're lying on a polished brick platform in a shadowed palace chamber, and the air is thick with the scent of sandalwood and slow-burning camphor. The light is fading now, filtered through silk curtains dyed with indigo and crushed pomegranate skin. You roll your head slightly, and it clinks ever so softly against something hard and smooth. Not soft cotton, not even lacquered wood. No, it's porcelain, cold to the touch, decorated with dragons chasing pearls. Welcome to the world of Tang Dynasty slumber. In the West, when we hear the word pillow, we picture something fluffy. Feathers, stuffing, softness, something to cradle your head. But in the Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907 CE, pillows were often made from porcelain, hard, curved, glazed, and sometimes carved. They weren't just for sleeping. They were tools of medicine, ritual, and status. And you, listener, are about to discover how a headrest became a mirror of imperial life. Tang China was many things: cosmopolitan, expansive, wealthy beyond imagining. It was a place where silk from the looms of Chang'an could end up in the bazaars of Baghdad, and spices from India might sit beside pickled garlic at an emperor's banquet. But it was also a civilization deeply attuned to balance, between hot and cold, between yin and yang, between spirit and body. The porcelain pillow, hard and cool, was part of this worldview. According to traditional Chinese medicine, soft pillows caused heat to rise into the head. Heat was unbalancing. It stirred the blood, scattered the spirit, and muddled dreams. A cold, firm surface beneath the skull, however, could cool the brain, steady the breath, and align one's ki, that flowing life energy said to animate all things. Porcelain was perfect for this. It could be molded into gentle curves to cradle the neck. It held its temperature through the night, and it wasn't porous, so it didn't trap the bad vapors that soft cloth and feathers might. This wasn't merely personal hygiene. This was cosmic maintenance. Deep inside the Tang Imperial Palace, whose name Damingong meant Palace of Great Brilliance, there were hundreds of rooms, but one room, rarely seen and seldom spoken of, was dedicated entirely to rest, not for sleeping, exactly, for preparing to sleep. A quiet chamber for shedding the weight of bureaucracy and ritual before the emperor laid down to rest. And among the lacquered furniture, medicinal shelves, and incense burners, there was a cabinet, long, narrow, lined in brocade, and sealed with a tortoiseshell latch. Inside, a collection of porcelain pillows. Each pillow had a name, not officially, but whispered among eunuchs and chamber attendants. There was White Cloud, shaped like a rolling mist and painted with cranes. Night Orchid, fired in violet glaze, and a rare one, Whispering Tiger, adorned with eyes that never quite looked the same twice. no one but the emperor chose the pillow. It was his moment of silence. Creating a pillow that would touch the head of an emperor was no minor craft. It began in the kilns of Gongxian, a city famed for its ceramics. Artisans used fine white kaolin clay mixed with water until it was the texture of cool paste. It was shaped into molds, dried, fired once, glazed, then fired again, all in careful succession. The glazes were not just decorative, they were alchemical. Some included crushed lotus seeds or deer antler powder thought to enhance restful sleep. Others were infused with herbal oils, camellia for peace, chrysanthemum for clarity. A few even had hollow chambers inside, where aromatic herbs or powders could be inserted to gently perfume the air around the sleeper's nose. Each pillow was not just functional, it was symbolic. Dragons for strength, lotus flowers for rebirth, clouds for enlightenment, and sometimes just a single word painted under glaze, Jing, Jing, meaning stillness. To sleep like an emperor in the Tang Dynasty was to follow a ritual. Slow, deliberate, deeply monitored. First, attendants would adjust the bed, a raised brick platform heated from beneath by channels that carried warm air from a fire outside. Silk sheets were laid. The emperor's robe, usually of light hemp in summer, heavier brocade in winter, was swapped for sleepwear. Then came the pillow. The selected porcelain headrest was placed just so, not at the crown of the bed, but slightly off-center to match the emperor's preferred side. He would lower his head, the chamberlain would retreat, and silence would descend, or almost silence. Even emperors were not free from distraction. There were whispers in the rafters, mice perhaps, or the breathing of guards behind the curtain. Somewhere, a night bell tolled in the temple precinct. The emperor's mind would wander. Had the envoy from Silla arrived? Would the court astronomer ever fix that celestial calendar? And what of the poem he'd started that morning? Had he really finished the third line? It is not easy, you see, to sleep when you rule a world. Many emperors had a favorite pillow, one they would keep near, even in travel. One Tang ruler, Emperor Xuanzong, known for his melancholy after the death of his beloved consort, Yang Guifei, was said to have slept with a simple, unpainted pillow glazed only in white. After her death, he reportedly requested the pillow be smashed. It was too cold without her. Another emperor, Muzong, preferred a pillow carved in the shape of a reclining ox, a symbol of calm and groundedness. He claimed it helped him anchor his thoughts. Whether it truly did, we do not know. What we do know is that when emperors died, many of them were buried with their porcelain pillows. Archaeologists have found dozens of these in tombs, nestled beside lacquered combs and bundles of silk. Some have inscriptions. One reads, "To sleep without worry, to rise with clear mind." Another simply says, "Stone dreams, cloud heart." It's curious, isn't it? That the thing resting beneath the heads of the most powerful men in the land, the final object they touched each night, was not golden, not jeweled, not soft, but cold, hard clay turned to porcelain, shaped with care, meant to quiet the mind. And perhaps you wonder now, did it work? Did the porcelain pillow bring true peace to the emperor? Or was it simply another burden of rule, a polished, painted, perfectly silent reminder that even in sleep, one must remain composed. Let's return to the candlelit hush of the imperial chamber. The emperor has lowered his head onto a curved porcelain pillow, glazed in white and inked with drifting lotus flowers. The flickering light from an oil lamp dances across the tiles, casting long shadows. Outside, a court attendant tiptoes down the corridor. Inside, silence grows thicker than smoke. But beneath that quiet lies a machinery, the elaborate system that enabled an emperor to rest, if not to truly sleep. The Tang Dynasty court was an ecosystem of duty, time, and movement. Even at midnight, it never truly slept. Let us walk softly through that night, not in the dreams of emperors, but in the reality of those who ensured they had the privilege to sleep. Behind every sleeping emperor was a cadre of alert, trained staff, never quite visible, yet always near. These included the inner eunuchs, trusted with ceremonial tasks and personal needs, chamber guards who watched silently from shadowed alcoves, and imperial concubines, some of whom had their own duties tied not to pleasure, but to routine. Among the least noticed and most consistent was the pillow servant, a minor eunuch whose job was to clean, cool, and sometimes rotate the emperor's porcelain headrests. It may sound absurd to modern ears, but consider the seriousness of the role. A pillow, improperly placed or carrying an unlucky symbol, might be blamed for unrest, illness, or even bad omens. A faint crack in the glaze might be read as a celestial sign. The wrong shape, too narrow, too steep, could lead to neck pain, and thus impact judgment. And so, the pillow servant learned his art like a scholar studies texts. He knew which glaze stayed cool longer in summer, which shape matched the emperor's preferred side, and even how to quietly add sachets of medicinal herbs inside hidden cavities in the porcelain base. He rarely spoke, but he listened and remembered. Just past the emperor's sleeping platform stood a narrow lacquered table. Upon it, a lidded porcelain cup filled with gently warmed goji berry tea infused with chrysanthemum petals. Sometimes, if the emperor had eaten too richly, as he often did, the tea would include hawthorn to aid digestion. Alongside the cup sat a single brush and inkstone. This wasn't for midnight edicts. Those required ceremony. No, this was for poetry. For many Tang emperors, the hours before or after sleep were considered ideal for composition. The mind was foggy but unfettered. The world was quiet, and if a dream stirred something, a phrase, an image, an emotion, it could be captured in a few lines on silk. The Emperor Xuanzong was said to have written a dozen dream poems in a single week during his later years. He rarely shared them, but the pillow servant would sometimes find folded slips beneath the porcelain headrest, dampened by the emperor's breath, with verses scratched hastily in red ink.
You may be wondering, how exactly did one sleep with a porcelain pillow? Wouldn't it be uncomfortable? That depends on what you expect from comfort. Tang-era sleeping manuals, yes, they existed, described the ideal posture as like the new moon over still water. That meant lying on your right side, left leg slightly bent, with the head resting not on the back of the skull, but at the base of the neck. The porcelain pillow was shaped to cradle just that portion of the spine. The coolness was intentional. It would encourage the body to draw heat downward, settling breath into the lower abdomen, aligning with Taoist breathing principles. It wasn't meant to be cozy, it was meant to be correct. In the same way that a ceremonial robe was not comfortable to wear, or a throne not built for reclining, the porcelain pillow was not about softness. It was about symmetry, symbolism, and statecraft. Tang emperors believed in the world of dreams, not as mere mental noise, but as channels through which celestial advice might arrive. Dream interpreters were common in the court, often monks or scholars trained in a fusion of Taoist, Buddhist, and Confucian texts. They were summoned quietly and asked questions like, "Why did I dream of a fox with two tails standing on a bridge?" Or, "What does it mean to float above a field of mirrors, but never land?" These men did not give straightforward answers. They consulted scrolls, studied lunar charts, and occasionally burned incense to receive divine suggestion. But more than prophecy, dreams served a subtler role. They offered a space for reflection. One emperor, Daizong, was so obsessed with the meaning of sleep that he banned soft pillows from court chambers, believing they invited trivial dreams. Only porcelain, he claimed, kept the mind close to the realm of heaven, yet firm on the path of reason. Outside the palace, porcelain pillows were also popular, though far less ornate. Wealthy merchants gifted them to each other. Mothers gave them to daughters in marriage. Monks used them to avoid dozing during meditation. But like many court items, the porcelain pillow could also be a political tool. There's a curious tale, likely embroidered but rooted in real fear, of an official who sent a sleeping pillow to a rival. It arrived glazed in green and gold, painted with chrysanthemums, beautiful but laced with mercury inside. The pillow, once warmed by body heat, released subtle vapors. The rival sickened slowly. No one could prove anything. Later, porcelain pillows were occasionally shattered before being sent as funerary offerings, a way of symbolically breaking ties with the burdens of the mortal world. Even in death, one must choose one's rest wisely. Sometime in the darkest part of the night, the emperor would turn. A subtle shift. His breathing might quicken, a dream might fade, and he might wake, not fully, but enough to register the porcelain against his cheek. Sometimes he would rise, sip tea, speak softly to the lamp flame, write a line, or simply stare into the glaze. And sometimes he would do nothing. He would rest, again. Breathing slow, pillow cold, thoughts drifting like dust in the chamber air. Outside, the stars over Chang'an burned as they always had, steady, watchful, and distant. And yet, for all this ritual, all this purpose, you might now begin to wonder, did all these layers of meaning actually help the emperor sleep? Or did they, in their own quiet way, keep him from truly resting? Dawn crept slowly into the imperial palace, not as sunlight, but as ritual. First came the scent, a thread of sandalwood from the temple compound drifting over the high walls. Then the sound, distant gongs marking the 5th watch. Then, at last, the soft steps of attendants padding across brick floors, carrying pitchers of warmed water and folded cloth. The emperor would not be shaken awake. That would be improper. Instead, the chamberlain opened the carved wooden screens just enough to allow slivers of daylight to pierce the hush. There, still and silent, the emperor lay, head tilted on the cold porcelain curve, eyes closed, hands loosely resting over a light brocade quilt. Even in sleep, he looked more statue than man, carved by expectation and gilded in fatigue. But in time, he stirred. The awakening ceremony. Few moments in the Tang imperial day were as structured or as intimate as the act of waking. This was not a simple matter of rising and stretching. Number. The awakening was part of the larger ritual of restoration. Sleep was not just rest, it was a journey away from duty. Waking meant returning to it. Before the emperor opened his eyes, attendants performed the refreshing rites, a series of gentle actions meant to cleanse the body and spirit. A soft towel infused with chrysanthemum and mint was passed gently over the face. A small jade comb was run once through the hair. Tea was poured, but not yet touched. The porcelain pillow was removed and placed inside its silk-lined box, accompanied by a bow and a whispered blessing. Qing Xin An Mian. Clear heart, peaceful sleep. Then, and only then, would the emperor rise. A record of the night. Not every night passed without incident, and so a curious document existed within the palace archives, the sleep register. Kept by the Grand Chamberlain, the register was updated daily. It noted the time the emperor fell asleep, whether he turned during the night, any spoken words or verses muttered in sleep, any unusual behaviors, a shout, a laugh, a dream recalled. All of this was considered essential data, not for gossip, but for state health. The emperor's sleep reflected the balance of the realm. An emperor who tossed restlessly might suggest bad weather ahead. One who slept too deeply might be under spiritual attack. There were physicians trained not only in pulse diagnosis, but in dream diagnostics. They would read these entries and consult scrolls. One passage from a preserved sleep register reads, "The Son of Heaven uttered empty road, red bridge twice before dawn. Tea unchanged, pulse steady. Recommend sandalwood incense tonight." It was a science, in its own sleepy way. What happened to the pillows? The Tang Dynasty eventually faded, like a dream from which a civilization awakes unsure of where it stands. By the 10th century, after warlords and famines had fractured the empire, the great palaces were looted or burned. Silk brocade was torn for bandages. Tea leaves were boiled for hunger, not ceremony. But the porcelain pillows remained. Some were buried with emperors. Others were carried away by soldiers, merchants, or thieves. A few made it into temples, where monks used them during meditation. Over time, styles changed. In the Song Dynasty, pillows became more decorative. In the Yuan, they became wider and more pictorial. By the Ming, they were often purely ornamental. But those early Tang designs, simple, curved, luminous in the way only fired clay can be, remained objects of quiet power. In the ruins of Luoyang, archaeologists uncovered one such pillow. It had no cracks. The glaze, sky blue, bore only a few brushstrokes, a pine tree. Beneath it, in small script, a single line. "Sleep well. Your thoughts will rise before you do." The philosophy of stillness. If there's a lesson hidden in porcelain, in its hardness, its chill, its fragility, it may be this: not all comfort is soft, and not all softness is comfort. The emperors of Tang China ruled vast lands, issued weighty decrees, hosted banquets of roasted peacock and honeyed jujubes. But when the night came, their heads rested on something simple, cool, and carefully chosen. Why? Because it was predictable, reliable, silent. Because it could not bend under weight and would never betray a sigh. And perhaps because in a life full of noise and pageantry, the most soothing thing was stillness. Pressed gently beneath the neck, holding the head just enough, and offering nothing but quiet. So now, as you lie wherever you are, whether it's a worn mattress in a tiny room, or a soft couch under a dim ceiling fan, you might imagine your head on porcelain, cool and curved. You might imagine a chamber lit by oil lamp, a scroll of poetry by your side, and a servant quietly removing your pillow at sunrise. You might imagine stillness, and nothing else. And as your breath slows and the outside world fades, you may wonder, Did the pillow shape the emperor's dreams? Or did his dreams shape the pillow? The city that slept to the rhythm of drums. Imagine, for a moment, a different kind of night. The air is dense with the smell of palm oil, firewood, and distant rain. The sound is not silence but patterned rhythm, drums pulsing low through the forest like a heartbeat under the earth. You're walking through wide, packed earth streets, the walls around you coated in reddish clay. Torchlight flickers, shadows stretch like dancers. You're in Benin City, sometime in the late 15th century, and unlike the Tang Emperor's cold porcelain chambers, sleep here was something shared, not shielded, not cloistered. In the heart of the West African rainforest, surrounded by thick earthen ramparts and walls adorned with bronze plaques, the capital of the Kingdom of Benin pulsed with a rhythm all its own. Even its sleep had a system, guided not by clocks or stars, but by sound.
A city without silence. Benin City, the royal capital of the Edo-speaking people, was an architectural marvel of its time. By the accounts of Portuguese explorers like Duarte Pacheco Pereira and later Olfer Dapper, it was laid out in careful rows, with broad boulevards and high mud brick houses adorned with carved wooden posts. But one thing made it especially unique. There were no windows facing the street. Why? Privacy, of course. But also because the city did not sleep quietly. The Oba, or king, presided over a court full of ritual, music, and movement. At night, the palace compound remained active. Drummers signaled changes in the royal night watch. Couriers ran messages from compound to compound. Women sang lullabies or praise songs softly under mosquito netting. And yet, despite the sound, or perhaps because of it, people slept easily. Drums that told time. The Kingdom of Benin had no mechanical clocks. Instead, it had a system of drum codes passed down through the generations of court drummers. Specific rhythms indicated different times of night. There was the early drum, low, steady, signaling the onset of rest. The midnight drum, syncopated, sharp, used to check the guards. And the first light drum, rising, rolling, summoning kitchen stewards and palace scribes to begin boiling yam and palm nut soup. You, as a common city dweller, might fall asleep to the early drum. If you awoke at the midnight rhythm, you might know to offer a prayer, a quiet chant to your ancestors, asking for protection. The drums gave a structure to dreams. Even in rest, the city was listening. The houses that breathed. Homes in Benin City were built with care for the air. Clay walls held coolness through the night. Thatched eaves extended like eyelids, keeping out rain and moonlight. Sleeping mats were woven from raffia palm, rolled out only after the evening meal and storytelling. Children often shared mats. Elders had raised platforms. And if you were part of the extended royal household, you might even sleep near carved ivory tusks, polished and kept upright in ritual storage rooms. Sacred objects said to calm the spirits of a house. It's important to remember that bedrooms were not private spaces as we know them today. Sleep was communal. Whispered gossip, a mother's song, the crackle of fire outside the threshold. These were not distractions. They were part of the rhythm of falling asleep. Night spirits and storytelling. Before sleep came stories. Benin oral tradition was rich with folk tales and mythic histories. Stories of wise tortoises, trickster leopards, gods who walked in human form. These stories were not just entertainment. They were instruction manuals, teaching patience, cunning, generosity, fear. A grandfather might begin his tale with a sigh, a warm palm against his belly, and the words, "Long before the first drum was carved." And the children would go still, eyes wide, bodies slowly relaxing as the rhythms of narrative wound around them. But beneath the stories lurked something else: the night spirits. Everyone in Benin grew up with the understanding that the forest beyond the walls, thick with gum trees, palms, and fig, was not empty after dark. There were Ehai, guardian spirits, Iwin, forest dwellers, and the ever-present risk of ancestral displeasure. The city was lit at night, not for beauty, but for protection. Fires kept the spirits at bay. So did praise songs. So did sleep itself. For a resting body gave no offense. And so you might begin to wonder, how does a city sleep when even its dreams are rhythmic and its walls hum with ancestral memory? Beneath the bronze eyes. The palace of the Oba at night was not a place of rest. It was a breathing, ritual-laced organism. Long after the streets of Benin City had softened under dusk's red light, the royal courtyards still echoed with sandals on packed earth, the murmur of attendants, and the deep calming beat of ceremonial drums. But not all of it was sound. Much of it was watching, because even in darkness, the bronze eyes never blinked. The sleeping king and his keepers. The Oba, the divine ruler of Benin, did not sleep alone. Yes, he lay beneath fine raffia covers on a platform raised by carved posts, the wood darkened from oil and years. Yes, his room was screened off by coral-studded hangings and ivory tusks engraved with scenes from his lineage. But around him sat, crouched or leaned, his night circle. This inner court was composed of trusted stewards, warriors, and eunuchs. Some dozed, some whispered, some simply sat, eyes half closed, waiting. It was not just tradition, it was protection. The Oba's body, even in sleep, was the vessel of the kingdom. His heartbeat was tied to the land, his dreams to the welfare of the people. To disturb his sleep was to disturb Benin itself. The bronze plaques that watched the dark. The great halls of the palace were decorated with bronze plaques, many now housed in European museums, but ones gleaming on the red clay walls of Benin City. These plaques depicted royal processions, courtly rituals, and scenes of power. But they weren't just art. They were spiritual guardians. Night watchers believed that the bronze eyes of these figures could see what human ones could not: misfortune, spirits, or bad omens. Offerings were left near them at dusk: a twist of kola nut, a bit of dried yam, a whisper of breath through cupped hands. Some caretakers swore the metal warmed slightly at night. Others claimed to hear faint tapping, like messages from the ancestors clinking through time. In this way, the palace did not sleep. It watched. The liquid that brought stillness. In a clay cup, cooled by the night air, sat a fermented drink called ogogoro, a kind of palm wine or spirit, used for both ritual and rest. Not for drunkenness, that was forbidden within the palace walls, but for relaxation. Elders and ritual staff might take just a sip before lying on mats, allowing the warmth to settle in the belly, soften the shoulders, and ease the body into slow breath. Some say ogogoro was poured into the earth before sleep too. A small libation to keep away dream troubles or restless ancestor spirits. The scent of it mingled with roasted yam skins and wood smoke, creating the sensory language of Benin's night, strong, soft, earthy, sacred. Dreamwalkers and diviners. But for some, sleep was not a break. It was a task. The palace diviners, known as Ominigbon, used dreams as tools. If the Oba experienced troubling visions or strange symbols, he would call them at dawn to explain. But more curious still were the dreamwalkers, men and women trained in meditative trance, who claimed they could enter other people's dreams or send protective visions to the sleeping Oba. They slept in special quarters, filled with burning herbs and drumming that followed specific breath rhythms. Their mats were placed beside carved stools on which they laid an object of the person they hoped to dream with. A sandal, a bracelet, or a folded cloth. By sleeping near it, they believed, they could influence what the owner dreamed. Outlandish, perhaps. But remember, this was a kingdom where dreams were data, where silence was suspicious, where stillness spoke volumes. Sleep interrupted. Of course, even in Benin, sleep could be broken. A royal courier arriving from a frontier town. A vision spotted in the fire's smoke. A small insect biting a child's ankle. The sound of a lizard scuttling along the rafters. Yet each interruption had its ritual. A servant might sing a short verse to soothe startled sleepers. The drum was hungry, but now it rests. The moon has seen us, and we've seen it. Let silence return to the roof. Or a priest might softly click kola nuts together, a subtle rhythm said to drive away disharmony. Sleep was never just personal. It belonged to the household, to the ancestors, to the city, and restoring it was everyone's work. And so you might wonder, in a world where bronze could see, drums could speak, and sleep was a shared responsibility, did anyone truly sleep alone? When the drums went silent. By the 1600s, the kingdom of Benin stood tall, not as a shadow of a civilization, but as a living, pulsing power. Its armies defended its borders. Its bronze casters melted metal into memory. Its markets filled with carved tusks, coral beads, and dried fish from the creeks. Portuguese ships still docked in its rivers. Yet something subtle began to shift, not in the light of day, but in the quiet of the night. The drums were changing, not all at once, but slowly certain rhythms fell silent. Some sounds, once part of nightly routine, were played less frequently or with different hands. And the reason was simple, if deeply complex. The world was getting louder. Sleep and the sea. Benin, like many coastal kingdoms, had long managed careful trade with European visitors. Ivory, pepper, textiles, and tragically, in time, slaves. The growing demands of foreign powers shifted the pulse of the city. more people came through, more goods, more strangers, and more worry. Sleep, once communal and loosely structured around ancestral rhythms, now had to account for new fears. Couriers slept lighter. The Oba's guards were doubled at night. Ritual dream watchers were consulted more often. The sleep register, yes, even Benin had one, kept by palace scribes in simple coded glyphs, showed more notes about restlessness. Offerings to the bronze plaques increased. And yet, despite it all, people still slept. Because even as the sea brought noise, the inner city held fast to its rituals. What remained the same? Every dusk, fires were still lit in clay hearths. Elders still folded raffia mats with care. Kola nuts were still cracked in the same two-handed rhythm, and lullabies sung in the same intonation passed down for centuries. Children still asked for the stories about the tortoise who fooled the sky, the tree that never slept, the leopard who danced in dreams. And grandfathers still gave them voice slow and warm, eyes closing mid-verse. Inside the palace, the Oba still lay beneath the carved roof beams, head turned just slightly, body relaxed into sleep like a sacred form of rest. The city was louder, but the old ways whispered beneath. The fall and the fragments. In 1897, after centuries of proud independence, British forces attacked and looted Benin City in what is now remembered as the Benin Punitive Expedition. They took bronze plaques, carved tusks, coral necklaces, and scattered them to museums and private collections across Europe. The palace was burned, the rhythm was broken, but not forever, because memory doesn't vanish with fire. In villages beyond the reach of soldiers, elders still poured libations. Drums were hidden, ivory tucked away, and in the quiet of night, even in the refugee compounds, people slept the old way, with rhythm, with stories, with someone nearby cracking a cola nut and saying, "Sleep." The ancestors still walk the roof, the echo of sleep. Today, the bronzes of Benin sit behind glass, their polished faces watching passers-by in London, Berlin, New York. But their eyes remember. They watched over a people who believed that rest was not abandonment, but connection. That sleep was a thread, not an escape, but a ritual. That the night was a space held gently between generations. And now, as you lie down, maybe under electric lights, or headphones, or far from the forest, you might close your eyes and feel the low beat of a drum, the warmth of fermented palm wine, the cool mat beneath your back. The story just beginning again. The rhythm is still there, even if only in the quiet between thoughts. So you might ask, if we forget the ways our ancestors slept, do we still dream their dreams? The last visitor of the night, the city outside has gone quiet. Shutters drawn, lanterns doused, street dogs curled in doorways. But here, inside the tiled belly of the hammam, there is still a low breath of life. Steam, heavy and fragrant, clings to the walls. A copper bowl clings gently against stone. Somewhere, someone exhales. It is nearly midnight in Ottoman Istanbul, sometime in the early 1700s. And you are the last bather of the day. A bathhouse with no clocks. This isn't the grand Topkapi Palace bath, lined with porcelain and reserved for sultans. Nor is it the cramped street corner chamber used by wrestlers and porters. This is a modest public hammam, built under the patronage of a wealthy merchant's widow, its domes cracked slightly with age, its walls warm to the touch. And it keeps no clocks. The hammam operates by body rhythms, not time. It opens at first light. Women bathe until the shadows shorten, then men until the heat fades. But occasionally, just occasionally, the attendants allow a final bather past sunset, especially if they arrive quiet, respectful, and bearing a small coin folded in waxed paper. You've brought one, and so you pass through the first door. The rooms within rooms. A hammam is not a single space. It's a journey of warmth. First, the sokluk, the cool entrance room. Here you undress, draping yourself in a rough cotton pestimal. Lanterns flicker along wooden benches. You sip water, your feet touch warm marble. Then the ulikluk, the warm transition room. Steam creeps in. You sit. Your skin begins to loosen. The world narrows. Finally, the hararet, the hot room. Round, domed, glowing faintly. In the center, the gobek tasha, or belly stone, heated from below. It's midnight now. You lie on the stone like dough rising on a hearth. Above you, stars of light filter through glass circles in the dome. They look like a distant constellation designed just for this place. The bath is silent, but not empty. The attendant who doesn't speak. You hear him before you see him. The quiet scrape of slippers on marble. He's an older man, perhaps 60, barefoot, wears only a faded towel, carries a copper bowl and a goat hair mitt. He nods once. No words. He's here to scrub your skin from sleep. The kese mitt, worn smooth from years of use, glides over your shoulders, then arms, back, legs. He does not ask where it hurts. He simply knows. A scoop of warm water here, a pat of olive oil soaked there. The foam rises like breath from the stone. You realize, strangely, that this is the cleanest you have ever been. And you wonder, how long has he done this? Does he sleep here? Does the bathhouse dream when no one is inside it? The steam keeps memory. Some say hammams have memory. That the steam remembers stories. That the stone beneath you carries the weight of centuries of sleepers, janissaries, calligraphers, cooks, courtesans, all of them lying here, all of them washing away the same invisible exhaustion. Your eyes close for a moment. You imagine the Ottomans who came here before you. A young soldier on the eve of battle. An old woman whose daughter is to be married. A baker who worked 16 hours in the heat. A dervish who never spoke aloud, but whispered prayers in the steam. You lie with them now, in silence. The warmth presses your bones like a lullaby. And so, before your attendant pours the final rinse, you might wonder, what is it we truly wash away in the hammam? The dust of the street or the noise of the world? Echoes beneath the dome. It's strange how time loses its grip inside a bathhouse. No ticking, no chiming, no call to prayer, just the soft drip of water, the hiss of warm stone, the clink of copper bowls. The world beyond, with its quarrels, markets, and bureaucrats, fades like ink under steam. Here, beneath the small glass stars in the ceiling, you are neither citizen nor servant. You are simply a body, warm, breathing, remembered by no one but the marble slab beneath your spine. But even as your limbs slacken, your thoughts do not. They begin to wonder. Who else has fallen asleep here and never meant to? the hammam as bedchamber. Though not designed for it, the hammam often became a place of accidental sleep. Eunuchs from the palace would sometimes slip in after sunset to rest their aching feet. Elderly tradesmen with no family waiting at home might linger so long they'd nod off in the warm room, waking with skin pink and fingers puckered. Women's hammams, open on alternating days, were famous for their afternoon dozing rooms, where a head would tilt mid-conversation and a shawl would quietly slide over the eyes. Some attendants even kept extra pestimols just for covering sleepers, not as a kindness, but as a ritual. Sleep in the hammam wasn't shameful. It was respected, like a sacred pause. To rest here was to return to the womb of the city, to let the walls breathe for you, the marble cradle your fatigue, the steam tell you when to wake. Ghosts in the glass. The small glass portholes in the ceiling, round, thick, and clouded, often became subjects of story. Some bathers swore they could see faces in them, not reflections exactly, but watchers, spirits of past bathers, sleepwalkers, ancestors. One elderly merchant claimed his mother once spoke to him through the center star, telling him to forgive a debt. But such things weren't feared. They were accepted. In Ottoman culture, the border between waking and sleeping, present and past, was porous, especially in steam. Dreams were believed to travel through warmth. Prophets dreamed in caves. Poets dreamed in baths. Ordinary people dreamed in hammams. And sometimes, perhaps, never quite woke. When the lamps go out, your attendant, the silent one with the goat hair mitt, has rinsed you a final time. You sit, limbs heavy, in the ulaklik now, the transition room. The walls are dim. The lamps, small clay oil lamps tucked into wall niches, begin to gutter out one by one. Not from wind. There is no wind here, just burnt time. You're given a linen wrap, a copper cup of water with mint, a square of locum, sweet, soft, slightly rose-scented. Everything here is designed to slow the body, to smooth the thoughts, to prepare you not just for rest, but for re-entry. But re-entry into what? Those who lived in hammams You are not the only one reluctant to leave. In some cities of the empire, Aleppo, Sarajevo, Bursa, old hammams were known to shelter the forgotten. Aging water carriers, retired scribes, widowed laundresses. They paid no coin, but polished floors and refilled lamps in return. They slept in corners, ate scraps, whispered memories into the walls. Over time, they became part of the bathhouse, like a scent or a pattern in the tilework. Even the youngest attendants spoke of them as furniture. The lady who hums near the firewood stack. The man who counts prayers by the soap basin. Ghosts, survivors, some both. The hammam did not ask. It simply held. And so you might ask yourself, if no one sees where you fall asleep, are you ever truly awake again?